You're listening to the Recovered Life Show.
This first episode I thought would be a lot of fun. The first segment I thought would be a lot of fun to talk about. It was.
Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Because I have to tell you, I'm sure we disagree on this.
I think so.
It was an Ask Amy article from the Mercury News, and Ask Amy is kind of like what would you say Ask Amy is? It's like a advice column.
Absolutely. She's kind of like Ask Abby. Do you remember that? Or Dear Abby, I guess is what we used to call it in Ann Landers. So for sure, people reach out to her and ask questions about relationships and different things that are going in her life. And she gives out, I think, really, really great advice.
She really does, and I have to say, I'm not somebody who, I don't think I'm the target demographic. I'm going to be honest with you with the Ask. I don't think I am, but I do watch it every once. I do read it every once in a while. It will pop up on the news feed or something, and I will I will read the article. But the funny thing about this article was it was really about this woman who's talking about a man that she wants to marry, a long-term relationship. And I think they live together. They're talking about they live together. And he is always intoxicated.
Absolutely.
Always intoxicated.
They're both young. So let's start with that. But she had made a decision. She used to smoke marijuana with him. And it was part of how they bonded originally. It was like a third person in the relationship, this reliance on it. Now she made a decision to quit, go to college, get her degree, and has chosen that she will not partake. And she wants to ask her boyfriend / fiance, because they did talk about long-term, marriage. She wants to be able to ask him to try sobriety and to quit long-term, but she's going at it in a way that it would be like, let's try it. You do it for a month and see. And then long term, her real want is that he remains sober like she is.
I have it up on screen for the people who are watching on YouTube, Facebook Live, all that stuff. I've got it up on screen. And for those of you who are listening on the podcast, I'm gonna read some of it here because I found this I found this quite entertaining, to be honest. I thought it was kind of hilarious to a certain degree, because and I know that's probably mean by me saying that, but it's basically, she's asking this question, is like, this guy is inebriated. He's basically high all the time. Right. Like they don't have a relationship unless this guy is high.
That's right.
I was just like, this is just a recipe for disaster.
Right. It's a precursor, absolutely, to things not going as planned. And I can tell you, I've been in this situation and I've worked with a lot of people since we talk about codependency, and I'm a codependent expert. A lot of people find this in their situation where they've moved on, they've bettered themselves, but the person they love is happy or comfortable with continuing to use substances.
Yeah. And I would, when we were talking about this before the show, I said, man, do you get this a lot in codependency coaching? You're like, yes, all the time. It's like, and my whole thing would be like, move on. Like, if you're sober, if you're not deciding to do this and you're with somebody that they're high all the time, that is like, I mean, those little cartoons where the person's up there and they've got the flags and they're like, don't go any further. And they break 15 barriers. That's what this has for me. That has this written all over it. Like the whole thing that we learned in early recovery. It's like, no, I can change them. I mean, it just like,
well, I'm going to throw something at you. So my husband and I are very happily married. We've been together for 6 years, but he was drinking when I met him. I had no idea that he was drinking, abusing alcohol, because he never drank around me. And once, I was already in love. He didn't drink around me. I had no idea. It's kind of funny because when you first get sober, you're analyzing everybody's drinking and you presume everybody is an alcoholic. At least I did for the first year. And then it had been some time. I was 16, 17 years sober when I met him. And I remember saying, oh, if you want to have a glass of wine, it won't bother me. If you're holding back. I didn't know his history. Once I saw him drunk, I recognized that he had a problem. And I had to make it incredibly clear. I have a special needs son. There was no way I was going to live with an active alcoholic. And so we ended up splitting up for a month because he said yes, but he didn't want to say yes. So he was angry, right? By the time I discovered it, I was already all in. And this happens to codependents, and maybe some people could think that, well, you must have known something, but I truly didn't know anything. We actually matched. And so I built a relationship with him when he was sober. And the minute I saw it, I knew we had a problem. And so I did share with him that there was no way that I would continue to live with an active alcoholic. I have a special needs son, and there's no way I can take care of a second person, nor do I want to. And at that time, he said yes, but he was not all in. He was angry. I suggested 12-step meetings because that was what I knew, absolutely what I knew. And what I understood was we spent the next 3 months with him being secretly angry at me and me not understanding what was happening. And we actually had to split up because there was no way that I could live with somebody who wanted to continue to go down this road. And I remember the heart-wrenching conversation. At that time, I didn't realize he wasn't actively participating in a 12-step program. He was just not drinking. And so the anger was spilling up. You and I always say the real problems happen when you put down the alcohol. That's when when you really need a different solution. And I am a good Al-Anoner, that's the accompanying program to AA, and I'm a codependent expert. So I stayed out of it and the anger grew. And we had to actually split up for a month, but we've been together ever since. And he just celebrated 5 years of sobriety and is coming up on his 6th year. So in some cases, it can work. It can work.
Yeah. No, I would, you're definitely the example of that it can work. I think the whole thing though, with this article that got me is that it's okay. I can change him.
Yes.
This whole thing, it's like, I would find, and God, I feel like I'm being a pessimist here. I'm going to be the opposite. Is like, I find that most of this ends in heartache.
It does.
People who are sober, who or are non-drinkers and it bothers them. Let's let they even say that they're alcoholics, right? Recovered alcoholics.
Right.
When they're with somebody who's not even necessarily an alcoholic, but a heavy drinker, right?
Right. Right.
That usually doesn't work well.
It
I found.
doesn't.
You know what I found? Because, and I listened to this, you hear it in 12-step rooms, you hear it through coaching calls. It's just like, I'm going to flash back to a clubhouse room that we had in a recovered life discussion. And this woman went on and on and on and on about years that she's been living with her husband, who is an alcoholic or abuses alcohol, right? Constantly,
Right.
About just the torture she's had to go through to try to stay sober day to day. So that's my side of it. I'm like, that's red flag, red flag, red flag.
It is red flag. And sometimes, I guess the reason why I believe in what I believe is that sometimes, we have these courtroom cards that get us into the rooms, where somebody's been popped for a DUI. I think that you can get sober for a girlfriend. I think you can get sober for a loved one, especially at the beginning. It can be your entry point and your motivation. Get sober for your children. We end up staying for ourselves. We end up staying. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with her asking for it. What I found to be deceptive was that she was saying it would be a little tiny, practice so they could get to know each other, and they don't know each other. I mean, that's the other thing.
Yeah.
When you are under the influence, we don't know that person totally. I didn't even know myself when I was under the influence, and I've had many relationships based on drinking because that's what we had in common. And when I got sober, and these are friendships or boyfriends, I realized I didn't have anything in common with them. And I really needed to know them. And some of that transition worked. Some people were life partners, life friends. Most of them weren't. So I think it's okay for her to ask for him to be sober, but her expectation has to be that it's sober for life, that it's something for them to look at together.
I think the key that you said here is so important. And I think your scenario is different because I would say that you he decided that, okay, I'm not going to, I need to get sober for me. Right. Like he
Mhm.
maybe sees what is going on around him.
Right.
Right. And then says, well, you know what? I think for me, I want to make the change. And that's also going to help everything else. Right. I found though that like this whole thing about, and look, having worked with a lot of guys in recovery, I know like I can't even tell you, Kristina, the amount of times it's like, well, I'm getting sober for her. And then
Mhm.
as soon as he sobers up, right, she's just like, I don't like you. Gone. Right. And honestly, and anybody who's listening to this, I don't want to freak them out if you're in early recovery, but and many times too, that guys will get sober and they'll say, "Oh my God, like this is not who I want to be with." Like
Right.
this person is not, because a lot of the times, not always, not always, but a lot of the times you will go into relationships, and not just romantic relationships, but friendship relationships, when you're actively using,
Right.
um, based on that criteria, not based on criteria of picking healthy relationships.
True, true. All of that is true. However, there is a chance and the right to say, I want to live a sober life and I want my partner to be sober is enough for the woman or the man to say, this is not the life that I want. I love you and you can do whatever you want to do, but I don't have to live with you. I don't have to continue this relationship. And sometimes people get really angry when their partner says that. They get really bitter. I have been working with somebody in the last, 3 years that had this scenario where he wouldn't quit drinking and he wouldn't. And so when she finally moved away from the relationship, he ended up getting sober and he, celebrated a year. However, it was with the idea, the result in mind that she would return to him. And that is not the case. And so in that particular case, I can look at it and say, man, that's also not a reason to get sober,
Mhm.
because
Look,
you think you're going to live your life.
well, whatever it takes to get sober. So I'm not gonna parse words about that. Like I get that, Christian, I get it. But I have to tell you, like personally,
Hmm.
like I think that getting sober for other people long term, if that's what it takes to get in, and I think that's majority of people, look, you're an interventionist, many
Hmm.
people will sit there in the meeting and they'll say, you know what? Clearly everybody's pissed off at me. Clearly everybody's disgusted. I'm going to do this just for them. Right. Like,
Hmm.
so they're almost guilted into it. But along that journey early on, it's got to be for you, because I believe, look, one of the things that you learn in recovery is people are fallible, right? Even people who love you the most and are dedicated to you to the most, it's fallible. It can, not only can it change, okay, but they also can make mistakes. People can
Right.
let you down, right? And ultimately, I think you have to be sober for you. That's my own personal feeling on it. You have to be sober for you, like, because eventually people leave or they die or something, right? Something happens, and if your whole recovery existence is based on other people, I find that like totally codependent in a way.
It is. It is. So I think you're right on. Eventually, it has to make that transition from I'm getting sober for her or him or them to I'm getting sober and staying sober for me. Now, that could take a little bit more time than people realize. And it's also not a bad reason to stay sober either. There are some days, in the past when things were very, very difficult, I knew that drinking was off the table because I couldn't be the mother to my high support needs son. And that was enough for that day to keep me sober. So I think that we're both kind of saying the same thing. I just know that, red flags can turn into white flags. There can be a surrender for sure.
Correct. And I think we would be kidding ourselves to think that, look, if people that are in active addiction
Hmm.
could see themselves clearly, if they could think clearly about the data and everything that they're seeing in their lives, they would of course choose. But you can't. That's part of addiction, is that it's very hard to see that. The person who's going through it can't see the full picture clearly, and their mind is telling them something else. So I think everybody that comes in, I would say almost everybody, a large majority of people that come in because of somebody else,
Right.
because they're affecting somebody else, right? And they're like going, oh, I got to go to rehab. I have to go to 12 steps, or I have to go to a therapist or something, because what I'm doing is affecting somebody else. And now they're seeing it. They're either going to see that, or like with most alcoholics and drug addicts, they're going to see the ramifications of that if they
Right.
don't do it. So it's like, well, I don't want to lose anymore, so I'm going to do this, right? And then hopefully through that, they get the message to do it themselves, that, hey, you know what? I like this. I want to do this myself.
So true, so true. And I think that there is this fallacy out there that somebody has to hit a bottom. And now I'm going to say something that's probably controversy, because I believe that my whole life until I was trained in intervention. And I realized they don't have to hit a bottom to stay sober. I didn't hit any kind of huge rocky bottom. The reason why I stayed sober is because I couldn't go to work one day. That was the reason why I started the process. But once I got there, once I started comparing my drinking to other people and realized, oh, that's right, I drink this way. I am a maladaptive user of alcohol. It has cost me. Then I stayed. So, if there's anything that I want to put out, is the fact that say something to your loved ones. A lot of people don't say anything when it's just alcohol or just pot, but those things are incredibly dangerous. And I tell people sometimes, if they were putting a needle in their arms, would you be as passive as you're being now? Because they're the
Yes,
same thing.
exactly. Well, look, I mean, the whole thing about hitting this bottom, I don't believe that either anymore. I used to.
Mhm.
I will say, one of the things that you learn in 12 steps, 12 step groups, is that the pain of active addiction and the memory of the pain of active addiction isn't always the thing that is going to keep people into the room, the fear of the pain. For some reason, addiction has this ability to look past all
Right.
the previous data and feelings and experiences, and just go for, I need that dopamine hit.
Right
I
now.
need to escape right now.
Mhm.
So it's not a good precursor, in my opinion, of like a low bottom of being able to stay sober long term. I will tell you that, sorry for the little pause here, guys. We're having a little bit of technical issues here today, I think, with the internet connection. I will tell you that it is not only not a precursor for it. I think that sometimes it hurts people because they come in so beat up that
Right.
it takes them longer to actually gain physical sobriety, longer to detox. And I've seen more and more people come in and with not low bottoms at all, very high bottom, people at the top of their game
Right.
saying, you know what, this just no longer works for me anymore.
So true, so true. And I hope that. I mean, what we know from a biological standpoint is that after 6 months of sobriety, you still only have 50% access to your neural pathways that you've had before. So there's no way for a person until about a year, year and a half to really understand what kind of life they want to have and what the decisions mean. So hang in there. If you've got somebody, if you are a classic codependent and you have somebody who has expressed an interest in getting sober, don't wait for it to get to a place where you don't have anything left for this person. Say something now.
Absolutely. You know what? I think that was I love this article, and I love having these discussions, and I love not always agreeing too,
Yes.
because the thing is, there's different paths to get there. And one of the things that I found through recovery is that you have to stay open, because there's different paths to get different. I used to think there was one way to get sober. There's a general path. People have to hit a huge bottom. Everything has to blow up and whatever. And you know what? I've learned through talking with people like you, and your experiences, my experiences working with other people, that doesn't have to be the case. Like we know now, sobriety is much more of a consciousness, right?
Right.
So a low bottom is not a precursor to be able to get into that consciousness.
So true. So true.
Well, Kristina, this has been a great segment. We have much more show to come. And before we move on to the next segment here, I want to talk with everybody about a great opportunity that we have in Recovered Life that you could take advantage of. Kristina Dennis and I created this really great codependency primer e-course. This thing is amazing. And the great thing about this is it only takes 3 days, a couple of hours of your time to really get the concept of this. It's called Can't Say No. It's a free 3-day challenge that you can download, that you can participate in totally for free. Kristina Dennis sends you 3 emails that come to your inbox. And it's a challenge and you go through it. So if anybody's out there that can't say no, what does that mean? You're an over volunteer. You're always a person in your family that has to rescue everything. You're the person always brings the cupcakes, even if it's totally convenient. You've done it 15 times to the kids event, right? You're always a person that has to jump in and you really can't say no and you feel bad when you say no. That might be a sign of codependency. So take the free 3-day challenge and you can get that totally for free at info.recoveredlife.us. That's info.recoveredlife.us.
Keep the conversation going. Join Recovered Life, a community of like-minded people who are looking to live their best recovered lives. Membership is free, and you can apply at recoveredlife.us.